Hey there, I'm not Will Bales. In this episode of Tail the Tape, we're finally nearing the end of the Fight Night format.
If you haven't seen this week's episode, stop now and go watch it. I'm warning you.
Our guests this week, Sam McAmis, thanks for the arena. Adam Wrigley,
Robot Jesus.
thanks for denting the arena. Craig Danby,
Craig Slamby.
were you at my event?
I'm Victor Soto with Rotator.
I'm Alex Espinosa with Team Icewave.
I'm Lilith Specht from Sporkanock, and this is Tale of the Tape.
Go! It's my show! Jeez, you're a couple minutes late. I'm Will Bales from Hypershock,
We're Mike and Andrea Galately from Team Witch Doctor.
and this is our Tale of the Tape. Get out, all of you!
Let's jump right into our 30-second recap.
30 seconds on the clock. Captain Shed gets his dome smashed in. Hijinks goes full Tanya Harding and takes out Chomp's legs.
Gigabyte makes Swiss cheese out of Claw Viper. Witch Doctor's discs finally don't break.
Gruff's hybrid drive system fails him in his loss to Extinguisher. Perfect Phoenix depletes Atom 94. Copperhead calls out Black Dragon and doesn't regret it.
For our first deep dive, we're going to talk about Shatter versus Shredderator. We were super impressed at that ablative armor taking those huge hits from Shredderator.
And I think they did a great job of waiting for the good hit and then actually doing some damage.
Yeah, and I was actually pretty impressed with Shredderator, spinning, getting some really good hits at the beginning, but unfortunately wasn't able to take it the distance. So let's hear from Adam what it's like to win a great match against Shredderator.
Now, although we've only been competing in BattleBots for 2 seasons, we've actually been building heavyweight hammer robots for the past 5 years. Back in 2016, my brother and I wanted to get back into the sport, but we hadn't built a robot in a while and we're trying to figure out what to do. And we knew we wanted to put Mecanum wheels on it because everyone kept telling us that was impossible. But we thought it would be really good. So we wanted to build a Mecanum robot, and we wanted to get on BattleBots, and we wanted to prove everyone wrong. But we had to figure out what else to put in the robot. We saw that 2016 Orlando Maker Faire was having a Sportsman heavyweight event, and that meant no spinners. And no spinners means we probably won't destroy our entire robot in one go. So it was a great way to test out some motors, some controllers, some wheels, and things like that. And when we went to that competition, we had a ton of fun. That event was thrown by Lilith, the captain of Sporkanock. We met the Witch Doctor team, the Hypershock team, and a whole bunch of other people down there at that event. It was a ton of fun, and we realized that hammers are awesome, and we never want to build a spinner. So this season's Shatter may look similar to last season's Shatter, but is actually a ground-up redesign of almost the entire robot. Starting from the inside out, the entire chassis is now a solid aluminum billet, made by our sponsor Prismere. It allows us to much more easily put together and take apart the robot in the pits. The repairability is so much simpler than last year's frame, which is made of slotted pieces that bolted together. So a solid aluminum piece not only allows us to repair easier, but allows the whole robot to be more modular. So on the front, this season so far, you've only seen our anti-horizontal setup. But we have a lot more things that we can bolt onto the front, from wedgelets to fangs to many other types of attachments. The whole front of the robot is much more modular. Even the hammer arms have various different lengths with various different weight heads on them to allow us to bolt those different things onto the front and move the weight around to different parts of the robot. So the new frame and the new modularity are big, but in addition to that, we've also been working on the aesthetics. So the whole robot is much shinier this season, and that's enabled by us actually laser cutting about 80 different individual triangle pieces. Each one is individually vinyled and then applied to the robot. So instead of attaching the vinyl to our UHMW plastic ablative armor, which has tooling marks all over it, we apply it to mirror smooth acrylic panels, creating a much more jewel-like appearance on the robot. We also bought dozens of different colors of vinyl until we found that perfect pink-blue tone, which we were really happy with. But the last and maybe even biggest change of the year in terms of the performance of the robot is that we bolted a lot of magnets onto the bottom of it. So we put so many magnets onto the robot, we actually can't even lift it up anymore at the end of a fight. And so those magnets pull us down to the arena floor and allow us to drive with a lot more force. Everyone knows the Mecanum wheels don't have as much pushing power as a regular wheel, but when we can add in all that downforce from the magnets, not only can we get as much pushing force as a regular regular wheel, we can actually get more pushing force than a regular wheel. So we're really happy with these magnets. And throughout the course of the season so far, we've actually been progressively adding magnets after each fight, trying to dial in that performance in the arena. Outside of some of those changes we just talked about on the robot as a whole, you may notice that it looks like our hammer is hitting a bit harder this season. And it is. We've been working on this hammer system for 5 years, trying to prove that hammers can cause damage. I think we're getting there. I think people are starting to believe us now. But how do we make it happen? So as a lot of people know, we run a brushless electric system for the hammer. That gives us pretty much unlimited shots in the arena, enabling us to hit people over and over and over again. But what does it mean? How does this work? And really it's a system. It's not just about 1 or 2 brushless motors. We also have gearboxes and chain and slip clutch and hammer arms and hammer heads and controllers and batteries, and tweaking any one piece of the system changes the entire equation. So we're always trying to figure out which part of it's holding us back, how we can push that a little bit further, and then see which link in this chain becomes the weak link and make that one stronger. One of the things that sets Shatter apart in the arena is our ability to drive sideways. And you hear the word Mecanum wheels tossed around a lot. But what the heck does that mean? What are Mecanum wheels, right? So I have this little model here, a little mini Shatter that we use for driving practice because we can't drive the real one around. We have little miniature Mecanum wheels on it. And what Mecanum wheels are this component. And it's a wheel covered in rollers mounted at 45 degrees. And each one of these rollers is not powered. We don't have extra motors or gears in here. These are just free spinning rollers mounted around the perimeter of the wheel. And what those do is they change the force vector of the wheel. A normal wheel, through rolling and hard rubber surfaces, can apply force forward and backwards. And that's it. But a wheel with rollers all around it can only apply force in a 45-degree angle in the same direction as the roller axle. And if it tries to apply force in any other direction, the rollers just spin. So by varying these 45-degree angled vectors in different positions at different corners of the robot, that allows us to apply force vectors in any orientation in combination. So we can drive sideways, we can drive forward and backwards, we can drive diagonally, we can rotate in place, and we can do all those things at once by varying the speed of the motors at each corner of the robot. With all that force vectoring going on, it could sound a little bit confusing to drive. But once you get all the electronics working, all the wiring, all the controllers, everything independently working inside of the robot, the driving is actually fairly simple. So we have here the actual controller that we use to drive Shatter. And it's a little bit different than your average controller. It's a little bit intimidating at first too, but you can pretty much ignore everything on here except this one stick. Now this stick is customized for this transmitter to allow us to drive Shatter. And what it is a 3-axis stick. So we have 3 things we need to do on Shatter. We need to go forward, backward, side to side, and spin in place. And that's what the stick allows us to do all at once. By pushing the stick in any direction, that allows Shatter to translate in that direction. So up and down is forward and backward, side to side translates a robot side to side. And by twisting this tiny knob at the end of the transmitter, that allows us to spin the robot in place. By twisting and pushing the stick, we can then translate and spin at the same time, and that's what allows us to circle around opponents. It's a little bit confusing at first, but once you get used to it, it's actually hard to go back to driving a robot that doesn't drive sideways.
On our next deep dive, let's talk to Witch Doctor, who's conveniently here. I think they did a great job of showing that once they actually have discs that don't magically shatter, that they can really dish out the pain.
Shatter was the first one.
Yeah, we were super excited that our disc didn't break, and at the end of our match, Mike made sure to check that they were good in case we get into the tournament by driving into the wall.
Completely on purpose.
Twice. But a real success story here is Craig Danby and Slammo, because he was undefeated up to this point, and he really, really gave us a close fight. Obviously, we had to win this match to have any hopes of making the tournament, and Craig did not make it easy. It was really close. So let's talk to Craig from Slammo.
So Slammo is a control bot. It's got 4 wheels, 2 in the front, 2 in the back. The wheels at the back are directly driven and the wheels at the front are slave driven, meaning that we should be able to lose both front wheels and still be able to move. It has 3 motors. It does 1 motor on the left-hand side for the left-hand drive, 1 on the right for the right-hand drive, and a single motor that drives the entire lifting mechanism. So what happens is the upper arms come down and they bite onto something. So as they come down and grip onto something, that gear can no longer turn. So as that gear tries to turn, the torque reaction makes the whole thing lift up. So the lower arms, which are not directly connected to the shaft, the shaft just spins loosely through them. They then lift up with the arms gripping. So the robot never grips with anything more than it needs to lift up. In fact, as it needs more gripping strength, it actually increases or decreases at the point of the apex of the swing. My previous BattleBots were Predator and Foxtrot, and they were designed to look a certain way. So the biggest difference from that was that at the end of the 2019 season, I had spent a lot of time in the pits designing and having my thoughts kind of reviewed by other builders. So I was sat in the pits and I'd had the incentive from one of the producers, Aaron, to build a control bot. And so I spoke to Paul Ventimiglia, I spoke to the Vasquez family, and I spoke to Waiachis, weirdly, and decided that these particular components in this kind of configuration would probably work. And straight after filming, I got in contact with Mobot, and we got Mobot as a sponsor. And having them as a sponsor meant that we had a very, very quick turnaround in terms of, this is my design. I've actually already started it. It's already in pieces in my garage. And then they gave me some money, and I was like, okay, now all of those bits that I want for it, I can have. I don't have to struggle to afford to buy them and that kind of thing. So it gave us a long lead period for building a robot that would actually work. And we also brought in a bunch of new team members in Randy and Jason and Mike Jeffries from the Bombshell guys. A couple of my local insect builders also came along and helped me just take my idea and make it work. Battle hardening wiring looms, battle hardening this, the kind of things that you think you can do on site, but to do them right, you can't. You need the right kind of time. Slammo was originally built for the Robot Ruckus event down in Orlando in 2019. It turned up, worked, was reasonably good, and basically since then it didn't really change in terms of design. Very little needed to be changed, but we did make a couple of little changes. So we changed the weapon motor from a short mag motor, a 150 size mag motor, to a 400 size mag motor, and increased the gear ratio on the weapon from 200 to 1 to 250 to 1, because that guaranteed that we could lift for over 500 pounds. After Maker Faire and making those adjustments and, cutting pieces out rather than back in and that kind of stuff and strengthening it in places, we did lots of dropping the robot. So I've got a loading dock at work. I've got several loading docks at work. And I would periodically drop them off, lift them back on, drop them off, lift them back on. And at first you'd do it with the robot off and make sure it's still powered on. And then you would do it turned on and make sure it still stayed on. And if it came up turned off, we find out why. If anything bent, you fix it. And we did that repeatedly for about a month. And it went from dropping off a 3-foot dock to a 4-foot dock to a 16-foot ladder to literally pushing it out of the back of a moving truck. Which we did hilariously a lot of. And one thing we found was that things like the weapon chain would snap if you dropped it on a particular angle. So if you dropped it face down with the arms fully closed, it would slam and break the chains. So we changed the chain. We went from a steel chain to a titanium chain, and it stopped that from breaking. So it's like, okay, we fixed that one. Move on. What other testing can we do? And we found that certain places the robot was bending. So we would cut and weld new little pieces to sort of more gussets here and there, and hopefully that fixed it. And the important thing about the chassis was that the main box where all of the electronics, motors and stuff is really solid and really secure, and that the weapon system continually works. The only thing that could potentially go wrong is the chain, which only went wrong in one fight. And that was because Witch Doctor hit it. Back in 2014, I came to America to compete for the first time at the Miami event, whose name escapes me. And I met a bunch of builders there, including the Witch Doctor guys and Will and Jeffries. And one of the people I met was Brian Nave. And I asked him at the time, I was like, why does Shredder have lots of tiny teeth? Why not just go for big, 2 big teeth or 3 or whatever Gigabyte does. And his response was, it was built for TV. And what TV wants is to tear your robot piece by piece. You want little pieces everywhere because it looks fantastic. And I'm not really one for building spinners, as Apex will testify. So in designing the sides of Slammo, I actually decided that none of the parts would interlock. They would all be fully welded and, you know, they'd be as strong as possible. But if they were going to break off, I wanted them to break off a piece at a time. And because they're just aesthetic, they protect the wheels, but they are designed to break away. And they're designed to break away a piece at a time. And by breaking away a piece at a time, you have this robot that is falling to pieces, but still works. Which kind of is what happened in the Witch Doctor fight, except when you hit it straight down the side, obviously the front wheel was already gone at that point. You'd already chewed that one to pieces. Thanks. And shooting the whole side off actually broke the rear wheel and game over. So didn't think it could shear that way, but it did. So yeah, Brian Nave indirectly helped me design the sides.
For a third deep dive, let's talk about Gruff versus Extinguisher. I think everybody was surprised at the end of this fight.
I was extremely surprised throughout the entire fight. And it was a back and forth of robots not working, and then Gruff had the upper hand and Extinguisher had the upper hand. It was just edge of the seat kind of fight.
Yeah, having fought Gruff ourselves in our first fight, I thought that Gruff would take it all the way. I mean, their drive was really robust through the majority of the competition. So seeing that little magic blue smoke coming out at the last minute was a bit of a surprise. But let's talk to Sam directly.
Thanks for having me on here. So we changed about everything on Gruff this year. One of the big changes we made this year was going to 2 torches. We'd always wanted to run 2 torches, but we didn't have the weight for it. So basically, we revamped our drivetrain so that we could save about 10 pounds there that we could then put in the torches. And the way that we were able to do that is we have I think we're the only robot that has a hybrid brushed and brushless drivetrain. We call brushed more or less. So basically what it is we have like a short mag that is, it's a brush motor that provides like our starting torque, and then our brushless motor that kind of kicks in and provides like a lot of the power once we get going.
It sounds like they're moving good. Yeah, I like it. Cool.
And so with that setup, basically instead of like having 25 pounds of drive motors, we've got like 15 or so. But we are having issues this season, like working out some of the like bugs with it. It's one of those things where it worked perfectly in the driveway, worked fine in testing. We did our best to stress test it, and you know, it was fine. And then we show up and get in the box, and we're breaking belts between our brushless and brushed motor, like in every fight. And so that's what happened against Extinguisher. It also happened in the Whiplash fight, but we made it a little bit longer. We were able to make it to the bell, but our motors were actually shot at the end of the Whiplash fight too. And then for the lifter, we actually added the ability to clamp, but that's something that we tried out in our first fight, and basically it wasn't reliable enough, and like we kept breaking the clamp system, so we kind of scrapped that. And then the torches, we basically completely revamped the torch system. So before we had like basically just a module that would bolt onto the top, and it was just like a series of 3 like weed burners that we kind of welded together and, you know, made something out of. But now we've got a like nice like CNC machined block of aluminum, and it's basically we have this whole torch manifold set up where basically the propane just comes in the bottom, and then it sprays out the 3 nozzles. So what we spent a lot of time working out this season was the ignition system. So like last year, our ignition was kind of hit and miss. This year, the first time that we put the prototype together, it worked really well and it ignited immediately. But then once we put it together with the final parts, it didn't work and we couldn't get it to light no matter what. And what we actually tracked down was the reason it was working initially was we had a leak in the output, and so it was leaking like low pressure propane onto the igniters before the main jets would go, and so that the low pressure propane would ignite, and then that would ignite all three of the main jets. So what we actually had to come up with was a way to recreate that leak. And so we actually, inside the robot, we have a little, it's actually an Altoids can that we have just a very low pressure flow of propane goes into that and leaks out by the igniters. And so it makes it like a little jet of flame that then lights our three main burners. It was awesome to finally get a chance to fight John from an extinguisher on the big stage. We were actually his first fight ever back when he started at the I think it was the 2017 Orlando Robot Ruckus, and he had it was a big plow with a fire engine siren on it, and we actually got a hold of him and ripped his siren off and knocked him out in 20 seconds. So I can see this match was kind of I guess a little bit of payback for him.
On this week's Chris Roast of the Night, Adam Wrigley whips his hair back and forth and smacks Al Kindle in the face.
Well, let's see this. Oh, there holy smokes! Now that, okay. Nice. All right, he's going to open for Led Zeppelin later.
I think Al Kindle might be a little jealous.
There's plenty of bot builders that are a little jealous as well.
Now it's time for this week's fan question.
Hi everybody, this is Kyle with the Behind the Bots podcast with this week's big fan question. This week's question comes from Tara Fisher, who asks, what kind of metals can you use for a weapon? Which ones break more easily than others?
That's a great question, and that question actually hits near and dear to home for us. Normally we'd throw this to Technical T-Rex, but I think Will Bales might want to answer this one.
What? Really?
No, I'm just kidding. We'll throw it to Technical T-Rex.
Why don't you appreciate me? I could be smart.
Technical T-Rex, Technical T-Rex. The T in T-Rex stands for technical.
When teams choose which metal to use in their spinning weapon, it's primarily a trade-off between toughness and hardness. A hard weapon tooth is desirable to get a good bite and cause lots of damage, but you want the weapon to be tough enough so it doesn't break during heavy impacts. Heat treating your metal allows you to find the balance between hardness and toughness and give you the best performing weapon possible. Here we have our state-of-the-art thermal oven artificial steel treatment experimental reproduction, or toaster for short. This toaster helps us demonstrate the effects of heat treating steel. At the most basic level, heat treating brings up the material's temperature to a point where the atoms inside are allowed to rearrange into different crystalline structures, giving the material different mechanical properties. The heat treating process alone can make the material soft but tough, hard and brittle, or anywhere in between. We have two materials, each representing a type of steel. We have simulated a heat treatment with our toaster on each sample, and we can compare the different material mechanical properties. These three samples of each material show an untreated state, a moderately treated state, and an overly treated state. The untreated state is very soft and flexible, not hard, but will not break. The moderately treated state, or Goldilocks state, is moderately hard, but not so brittle it's likely to break. The overly treated state is extremely hard, but very brittle. In conclusion, various materials can work for a weapon as long as you have the right recipe.
For tonight's Thing of the Week, we have... Whispers of the Week.
Whispers of the Week. Yeah, let's talk to Peter Abramson, the Bot Whisperer.
Hey, Andrea, Mike, Will. It's good to see you guys. It's way too long in between events. It's nice to be able to sort of at least catch up briefly on this.
Hi, Peter. Hi, Bot Dad. All right, first question. How did you get involved in all this?
Well, let's go to the Wayback Machine because it's goes all the way back to the late 80s, actually. To preface this, you have to understand that Greg Munson and I have been friends since 7th grade. Mark Satrakian and I have been friends since high school. So we've grown up together, made a lot of stop-motion movies together, blew a lot of things up together. This is kind of, we've maintained this friendship all the way through till now. A friend of Mark's from ILM, Mark Thorpe, called up Mark and said, I'm going to do this thing that I'm going to call Robot Wars, and I want to build robots and have them fight each other. So Mark dove into that. I was busy shooting a film up in Seattle while Mark was working at Rick Baker's studio, and during the off hours, he built the Master, the very first Master for Robot Wars 94. And he had called me up and said, I need you on my pit crew. And so I flew down from the film shoot for that weekend to go to Fort Mason in 1994 and was on Mark's team with the Master for the very first major robot event that sort of helped birth all of this that we are. So, 1994, 95, 96, 97, Robot Wars. BattleBots, Long Beach, BattleBots, Vegas, Fort Mason, Treasure Island, all the BattleBots on Comedy Central. Steel Conflict, Zozbots, Robo Games, of course, and then when I stopped sort of competing and started being on the crew, all of the new 2015 BattleBots to present. So I've been around a bit. If you want to know more actually about the sport and the early days of it, I suggest Gearheads, written by Brad Stone. This is a great book that tells the history of Robot Wars and BattleBots and FIRST and SRL and all sort of the early birth of robot combat.
You used to be a builder, and now you're on the production side. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Greg called me up and said, we finally got a contract. ABC is going to pick up BattleBots. Do you want to compete? And I did a budget on a new bot. I don't think I was going to compete with Ronin back here. Ronin was a super heavyweight, so it was way overweight. It was underpowered for doing anything new. It just, electronics are blown, batteries are dead. Ronin is a sculpture now. I did the budget and asked Greg what the stipend was going to be for the builders, and he told me, and it didn't match what my budget was. So Greg said, why don't you come in and be like a technical advisor? I mean, I was already involved with sort of things about safety, talking to Greg and sort of discussing different things of safety, different rules, stuff like that. So it was a natural stepping stone to kind of come in and be behind the camera now, and help make the transition for production and combat robotics. Since I spoke both, I mean, I've been in the film industry for quite some time. I understand film and television. And of course, I also speak bot, right? I know you guys well enough, and I know how to sort of what you tell me is going on in your robot and how to translate that into words for like Chris and Kenny, for them to be able to understand what they're witnessing in front of them.
So is there a script? I mean, are you riffing everything? What's the format for your part in the show?
No, they do not write a script for me. It is all live. I'm out there without a safety net, unless you consider the cutting room floor to be the safety net. The only notes I got from the production team was be yourself. We want to see Geeky Peter out there being Geeky Peter. And Chris Cowan, executive producer, had said to me, I want you to speak in a language that I don't understand. Because what you are doing is you are giving me a glimpse into this world because you understand this world in a way that we don't. Tell us about it. And don't worry about us getting it. If we don't get it, we'll have to look it up. We'll have to figure it out. But just be yourself and explain it the way you think you should explain it. Talking about robotic combat and how excited you are about it.
Now that your role is in front of the camera, did that affect your role behind the scenes?
Most definitely. This year was incredibly tough. Right before a match, I was always sort of running down to you guys and having a conversation with you right then and there before you went in, so that if there was a strategy change, if you guys have put some different attachment on, you've seen something that the other robot has done, that maybe you're going to adjust how you're going to fight, all of that data that I used to get right before a fight that I would then quickly relay to Chris and Kenny. Well, obviously with the COVID restrictions and with me now sitting in front of camera, it was very difficult to get all that data. My first day, I felt like I was drowning because I was having a really hard time having the data I needed to do my job, and doing my job was keeping me from getting the data I needed. So that was tough. I ended up just having to come in earlier and work longer at night. I would usually be there about 6 a.m. and I was generally falling asleep sometime around 1 during the whole 2 weeks we were there. In the evenings, I was relaying to the selection committee about what the fights were going to look like and if Robot A could even fight in the morning, or if we should move Robot A against Robot B to the afternoon because of the amount of repairs that were going to go on. All of that. And then, of course, Greg would post the fights sometime around 1 or 2 a.m. for the next day. It was tough. It was really, really tough. But I did finally get into a groove, and it became really fun to be there in front of camera and to be interacting directly with Chris and Kenny the way I was, to sort of be a part of the team like that, made it, this has been a great year for me. Gotta tell you, I've really enjoyed myself now, being the bot whisperer in front of camera.
So obviously, Peter, we've all known you for a long time, but you're a new face of the BattleBots TV show, and I think it's been a great addition. So thank you so much for being on Tale of the Tape and giving us that inside look.
So that's our show.
Hey, you got a little, what thing behind you there? What other way? Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah. Well, let's just go straight to that wonderful montage.
In this episode of Behind the Bot, we finally reached near the end where robots are finally running out of fights.
I'm not behind the bots.
Tail of tape.
God damn it, Persenator.
I'm Will Bales with Hypershock. I'm a drug lately with Witch Doctor.
Welcome to this week's Tale of the Tape. And on our first deep dive, we're going to talk about the...
Shatter. Let's talk about Shatter. Talk about Shatter.
Okay. You do it. Go ahead.
I could be smart.
There, Will.
Don't mess with the chair. You paid good money for that.
It was sticky.
Technical T-Rex, Technical T-Rex. The T in T-Rex stands for Technical.